You're listening to the Valley Current.
So welcome in. Let's talk a little bit about your journey from the East Coast, because you're a little bit like me. I think you're actually a lot like me. We both were East Coaster that sort of made our way to Silicon Valley at a very interesting time in life. I mean, Silicon Valley was really, I remember it when it had orange trees and people that could buy a house for less than $50,000. I think the first house I bought here was like 38,000 or 48,000, a little tiny cottage with not a lot of space. And we thought we were killing ourselves at the time to buy it. But boy, I think that house recently sold for $2 million, and it's only about 1,000 square feet. It's less than 1,000 square feet. So I kind of crack up at what's happened here. That place you've got in the background there in Canadian dollars is probably less than what you could buy 1,000 square feet in Palo Alto for these days.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, it was interesting. I remember when I first started looking for houses to buy in Palo Alto in 1973, maybe 74, in that area. I actually found one in Palo Alto, not too far from El Camino, that was $16,500.
Wow.
It was a tiny house, but it had its, I mean, you got dirt with it. And yeah, I mean, it was a different place back then.
Do you ever drive by and say, man, I wish I would have just held on to that, and now it's worth like 3 or 4 million or something? No?
No. I mean, look, if I had had any inkling that this was going to happen, I would have bought a lot of houses over the years, right? But
I mean, my mom tells a story. She said she would have been a billionaire with a capital B if my dad, who was very frugal, had allowed her to buy these lots in a place in eastern Long Island called the Hamptons. And back then, the beachfront lots where you signed a 10-year commitment and you paid the owner like $100 a month for each lot for the next 10 years. And she was like, I'm all in. I'll find the $1,000. I want to buy 10 of them. And my dad was like, they won't even finish the Long Island Railroad out there. Forget it. The Long Island Expressway won't have it. And my mom was like, there will be helicopters that will fly from the rooftops of Manhattan. People want to be on the beach and out of the city. And my dad stopped her. And to this day, my dad died a few years ago at the age of 90. My mom is 90 now. She was like 7 years younger. So it was 5-7 years ago. She said, if your dad had only let me, to this day, I would be set for life, and you would be set for life too. And I said,
yeah, if only, right?
If only, right? The woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of syndrome, right? Tell me, what made you instigate towards coming out to California? Because you're an East Coaster. You were born in Delaware, I think, right? Am I remembering this right?
I actually was born in Dayton, Ohio, but when I was an infant, my family moved to Delaware. My dad became the maintenance supervisor at the power plant there. So he was a self-taught steam engineer.
Okay.
And he came there to, as he pointed out, when he was in really great shape, so was the plant. And then over the years, both he and the plant deteriorated, and his job got harder and harder. But that's how I came.
For the third industrial revolution, bringing steam and power to the world, right?
Well, that was the second one, right? And he rather liked that, but he had a boss from hell, and so life was tough for him that way. But it led to some interesting experiences for me, because I a couple of times got summer jobs as a meter reader, so I got outside and went house to house.
And you really enjoy it too.
Oh, I did. Sure. Being outside is really great. But anyway, so I grew up in Delaware. My parents were, some of the few adults that did not work for DuPont, and went to, just went to school there. And when I went off to college, I went far enough to get away from home, but not too far. Went to Lafayette in Easton, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And then also something, my mom died when I was a sophomore, and she had always suggested that, look, the thing you need to do is to spend your junior year abroad. Okay, I mean, she had dreamed of being able to do something like that. They had never traveled. And so I took the suggestion, and so I ended up going to Paris for my junior year, 1968-69.
That's what made you a man of international mystery right there, right?
Well, it taught me how to speak French, which I then forgot, after I left, and, could have used when I went back 40 years later. But no, it was a fantastic experience. We were there for de Gaulle's abdication, the election of Pompidou. We were there for the closing of the slaughterhouse, Les Halles. The city was completely different back then. It was before they had sandblasted all the buildings, and they were still medieval black.
Right. Yes.
It was a different kind of place. And of course, the riots of May 1968 had still left some smoke in the air, and attitudes were tense and so forth. But it was fascinating. That was great.
68 was a big year in America as well. I mean, 68 is a little bit like how we're going to remember 2020 and this COVID stuff, and 2019. It's going to be burned in our memories for sure, and our kids' memories, and probably grandkids and so on. So exactly. Why did you go to law school? Because you went to Columbia, if I'm remembering, right?
Yeah, and how did that happen? It was sort of, I thought, what was I going to do, right? The war was still going on, the Vietnam War, and I had, but I knew I wanted to go to law school. Why? Because it would make it more likely that I could get into the Foreign Service.
Foreign Service, okay.
Which is what I thought. I wanted to go back to Europe. I thought that was pretty cool. So if you were a lawyer, I figured out, I didn't know any lawyers. I had never been in a lawyer's office. I didn't know anything about what lawyers did except Perry Mason. Which was a great
black and white TV show, and still is. The reruns are great.
It's fabulous. No, it's really good. I never could figure out how, the investigator, his secretary was way smarter than the investigator.
Exactly.
Anyway, another story. So I thought what I really needed was to go to a law school where they had a great program for international law. And I did the research and so forth, and I found out Columbia was the place to go for that. So I applied, and I got in. I also applied to a Navy program that would have given me a deferment to allow me to go to law school and so forth. But then they had the first lottery, and I ended up with a very high number, and so I didn't.
You lucked out.
In the list, I did.
You lucked out. I lucked out as well, and I did finish college, graduate school, and ultimately came out for law school, but then went back for business school. And so I'm a Columbia Business School grad and a UCLA law grad. And it's interesting, those networks are very different. The networks in California are very different from the networks in New York. And when you have one foot in both, you see all sorts of opportunities that a lot of other people don't see.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Anyway, so my expectation was I'd go to Columbia, learn international law, and go work for a law firm that had an office in Paris. And my first year, I learned two things. Right? One was that the law firms on Wall Street did not send associates over to Paris. Right?
You had to become a junior partner for that, right?
And even then, they mostly staffed them with local nationals. But
right.
The more profound thing that happened was in my second semester of law school, I was allowed to take one elective. And so I elected the international law course that was available. And it was the law of treaties. And it turned out, I'm not kidding, this, of all my time in any school, was the most excruciatingly boring course I ever had.
Is that right?
Oh,
I would think that would be exciting. No?
Treaties?
Yeah, I mean, treaty law is now a very in thing. I mean, the treaty. But you're saying that motivates you to change course? The boredom of it?
I started that course, my second semester, at the same time that I got my work-study job, because I was allowed to work 20 hours a week and get paid at the Legal Aid Society.
Oh, okay.
So at the same time that I fell out of love with treaties and international law, I found the love that I really established over the years, which was going to court. Because at that time, they had just instituted a program allowing law students that were under the supervision of a lawyer in the office to go and act as effectively as lawyers at hearings. So by the time that I left, I continued to work there part-time my entire time at law school. By the time I left, I had almost 100 contested hearings under my belt.
Well, you must have been doing a lot of landlord, tenant, and consumer rights and stuff that came in
welfare,
the legal aid, right?
Welfare, unemployment insurance, landlord, tenant.
But the advocacy is the same art of advocacy, regardless. I mean, people don't realize that, but it really is.
Yeah. And so the main thing was not being afraid of going into the courtroom and doing whatever you needed to do, so that when I came out here, and then here's the story of that. The fall of my second year in law school, I had decided, because I visited California in 1969, I decided I was going to go to California, come hell or high water. I had 2 offers in Delaware to go back there. I could have stayed and worked on Wall Street, I suppose. But I wanted to come to California, so I wrote to every law firm in California that had 8 or more lawyers, which was about almost 220 firms at the time. And I didn't care whether I was going to go to LA or San Francisco. I just wanted to get to California. And out of that effort, long story, I got one offer from this little 11-lawyer firm in a place I hadn't heard of much called Palo Alto. And so that's how I came in the summer of 1972 to be the first summer at Wilson Sonsini.
Which back then had a slightly different name, or really very different name.
Yeah, when they made the offer, it was called Wilson, Mosier, and Martin.
Right.
And that's when they were on Welch Road over near Stanford. And then they had when they moved to Palo Alto Square, Elton Martin said he didn't want to go. And so they put Larry's name on the firm, and that's when I arrived. So it was just, dumb luck arriving in Palo Alto right at I think it was the year before one of our clients, Ralph Verst, had coined the term Silicon Valley.
Well, people don't remember, but a big law firm was basically 11 people. 10
to 15 lawyers. There were 4 big law firms in Palo Alto, right? It was your firm, Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick.
Right.
The Wilson firm. It was
Ware and Friedenrich?
Ware, Fletcher, and Friedenrich.
Right.
And Christ, Griffiths, Bryant, Schultz, and Bjorn.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Those were the big firms in Palo Alto.
And they were like 15 lawyers or 10, 15 lawyers. That was it.
Yeah.
And that was considered pretty substantial, because most firms are like 2 or 3 people, maybe mostly solos. And we didn't have, San Francisco had bigger firms, but those firms did not invade Silicon Valley. They were like, the clients can come up to us and visit us if they really
and that's what it was like. That's what it was like then. They kind of looked down their nose at us, and we just kept hoping. And this honestly was the reason, I think, that John Wilson put this together in the first place. These were guys who liked living on the peninsula. He and Eldon Martin, Roger Mosier, and they just wanted to see if they could get the clients and have a decent business practice down here on the peninsula.
The parallel story that's out there is I'm good friends with Blake Stafford, And Blake tells a story, and I got to drag him onto the podcast. He's always so busy because he does a lot of international golf course work throughout the world for a famous golf course, Robert Trent Jones, famous golf course designer.
Oh yeah, he lives here.
He lives here in Palo Alto, and he says, everyone was like, why Palo Alto? And I said, I went to Stanford. I know Stanford's going to be here forever. Those people are going to graduate and look for lawyers. They're going to do entrepreneurial things. Let's just take a risk, because he left with a group at a big firm, not Cravath. I want to say it was Cleary
Gottlieb. It was Cleary Gottlieb.
Because I think Wilson and Sonsini were really sort of like the Cravath model, right? Weren't they thinking build Cravath, but out here in California?
Not necessarily John Wilson, but that clearly was Larry's ambition. In the 1970s, and you got to hand it to him. He absolutely did it.
When I interviewed, they had Fenwick, what then had become Davis, Stafford, Cohen, Fenwick. The names kind of shifted. They had the 8th floor, and I want to say that Wilson had the 9th and 10th that was bigger.
No, there was only one floor.
Only one floor.
Only one floor. 9th floor.
And you guys had all the 9th floor, and I think that David Stafford had like half or 2/3 of the 8th, but planned to expand further into the 8th. And I think it eventually became 8, 7, and then 9, 10. And the building got a little congested with, interfloor traffic of the elevator, which was kind of interesting to deal with.
Seriously, think about it. Back when you and I came, it was Palo Alto was a sleepy college town.
Right.
And now it has the greatest concentration of lawyers of any city in the world. Seriously.
Do you want to hear me? Someone told me there's a stat that says the most patents get filed from inventors per capita in Portola Valley. Portola Valley's got like the highest percentage patents per inventors / per capita. It's not a very big town, but it's on the western border of Stanford, and it's semi-rural, and people like living there. I do like living there. Of course, it's a great place. But how did you pivot from what might be called international and trial advocacy in kind of the trenches of New York to, hey, come to California and why don't you do some trade secret law? Because you're the guru. You literally are the guru of trade secrets. I don't really even think of Roger Milgram anymore, even though he did that big, ginormous treatise. I don't think of him as having as much on the ground experience as you do. Roger, if he's still alive, will probably correct me on that, but Roger stayed in New York, I want to say, right?
He is still alive, and I think we consider Roger the dean of the trade secret practice. But one of the reasons I wrote my treatise back in the 90s was I'm sorry, Roger, but I found his treatise so hard to read. Right. It was organized around a system that he came up with as a graduate thesis for looking at the law around trade secrets, and it's a kind of an odd organization.
And I always thought Roger had kind of a view that there couldn't be any sort of statutory treatment for trade secrets. It had to be more of like a common law, case by case. And even the restatement, I think he tended to almost disagree with the restatement. Like he had some view that, hey, you're going to have to live with a 10-book treatise because it's just a lot of law, and get used to reading a lot of law because that's what it is.
Well, in the 60s when he started all this, it really was nothing but the common law. There was a restatement from 1939, but it was just cases. My problem with working with his treatise was Roger never took a case out. And so he ended up with page after page of nothing but footnotes. So I wanted something that people could put on their desk. It would be one volume, and it would stay that way because I just put in the most recent, most compelling cases. But anyway,
it was very well received, and I think it's still available for publication on Amazon. It's still accessible on Amazon, certainly in the library.
My treatise?
Right?
My treatise? Oh, yeah. I updated.
You're still updating it, right? You're still.
I sure as I'll hope so, because every 6 months I go through the process of updating all 900 pages or whatever it is. So, which is no small task.
No, it's a lot of work for you. It's a lot of work for any author, Roger
Yeah.
Milgram included, if he's still working on his treatise. I didn't know if he really was doing that.
I don't know, but for me, it truly is, Jack, a labor of love. I mean, I did that, and some number of years ago, somebody told me, you should create a mission statement for your professional life. What is it that you really want to accomplish overall? If your biggest aspiration. And when I sat down and worked on it, what I came up with was, I want to elevate trade secrets to the same level of respect as the other forms of intellectual property. That's what motivates me, and that's why I do the writing and teaching and all the rest of it.
So
but
just to show people, because people don't realize that they can actually do stuff like this, let me just show you and show the audience that eventually looks at this, that there actually is this great loose leaf edition trade secret book. Of course, Amazon's temporarily out of stock, so you may want to get them to correct that. But literally, you are also an online resource. This book is available online as well. And I guess it says here it's up to something like how many pages in total?
It's somewhere around 900 pages.
And you got a lot of other publications here, but I'm just sort of looking at what's there, and there's obviously other sellers that bring stuff to market, right? It's an 800-page book, but it's really, really well done, and I highly recommend it. We have one of your treatises. I'm not sure we have it online. Maybe we should, but the publisher has been the same publisher for quite a number of years, right?
You know what, Jack? Thank you. I have never looked at this page. I had no idea that I had such good ratings.
Yeah, you've got great ratings. So let me.
Oh no. That's not my book. That's the seller.
Okay.
I was going to say.
I thought I saw a rating too.
516 people that have ever looked at it. Anyway,
but it's more than that, because you actually provided a lot of model forms and other things. Yeah. And you do update it constantly, so it's updated twice a year, it says. So you're working hard to look at the more recent cases, and there's been a lot of law. Of course, there's been a lot of sort of writing on intellectual property because it took off like a rocket. The intellectual property in Silicon Valley literally took off like a rocket. And of course, here's a review. James Pooley is a well-known and highly regarded attorney. This book
says I'm at Morrison and Forster.
Yep. There it is. 840 pages. I was looking for it.
Oh, okay.
5.6 pounds in shipping. And it ranks 5,851 of the intellectual property books, which is actually a pretty good rank because there's so many. And it's such a substantial book with obviously a pretty substantial author behind it.
As you see here, it's published by Law Journal Press. And, if you go direct to them, they'll happily get it to you.
So
anyway, you wanted to know how did it happen? How did
it happen? How did that happen?
Yeah. So this one's pretty interesting. Boy, I wish I had brought a copy of the thing in here, but I, having landed as a trial lawyer in Palo Alto in 1973 when I graduated, I did everything that came in the door. Civil contract cases, neighbor fence disputes, divorces, juvenile, criminal, whatever. But the most common civil case that I had, certainly the most common business case, was trade secrets, because that's when the Valley was growing apace, right? People were leaving one place, starting something, and new companies everywhere.
Right.
And so I was just doing more and more of them because I was there, and there weren't many lawyers, and maybe not many that would have felt comfortable with the technology. But anyway, I did a lot of them. And after about 7, 8 years, I was sitting, I think I told you the story once, I was sitting in the courthouse with an expert and describing to him this sort of central truth I had discovered about trade secret cases, because by then I had done, a couple of dozen at least. And I said, there's one thing that's common. They're all very different. The personalities are different and the technology is different, but there's something that happens in every one of them that's the same. Somebody did something really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And so it occurred to me, because, I've handled a lot of these things, I know what the rules are. If there was a book that told people how to handle themselves and what trade secrets were all about and what the rules of the road were, then these cases would go away, because, nobody would do those stupid things anymore, right? And I said, yeah, and so I said, but nobody would publish a book like that. And he looked at me and he said, well, I would. And this guy turned out to be, Adam Osborne, who was an expert at the time. He also had his own publishing company that published software books. And I was his first and only non-programming book. But he ended up selling the company a few months later to
McGraw-Hill. Yes,
and went off and started Osborne Computers.
Right, and Osborne Computers had the first luggable.
First portable. They called it portable.
Portable. It became
and we called it luggable.
Luggable. I mean, it was a big suitcase, but it had a little tiny screen.
Little 5-inch monochrome screen.
Well, let me show you this, because I got this in the post today, and it literally is a pocket PC that connects directly to the web. I haven't scanned it in yet. It says the Legal Cloud Desktop. It's like the size of 8 quarters, like literally 8. If you look at this, I'll send you the link.
Lift it up a little bit. Lift it up a little bit. Higher. Yeah, there you go.
Albert.
Wow.
It's called the Legal Cloud Desktop, the smallest, most secure, and most powerful desktop that you never need to upgrade. Essentially a monthly fee to get out of lugging computation around, because you plug this thing into a TV with an HDMI port, and you essentially, they've made it so that effectively you can put it in your pocket. You don't even have to scan it through the scanner system at the airport. And their view of life, I think, is, hey, this is the future of assuring that you're not going to lose your friggin' life in your laptop. So many notebooks and laptops have been stolen. This thing is all password protected. So someone tries to get in and basically it blows up, kind of thing. It's a classic example of Moore's Law making its way to smaller, faster, better, cheaper, right?
Yeah. On the other hand, it's Back to the Future. What you're telling me is that we're going back to the days of the Trash 80 and using our TVs as the monitor. Is that it?
We're going back because the monitors have become so cheap and all over the place. We're going back to the time-sharing era, except the internet's far faster than time-shared mainframes or time-shared computers. But when you decided to write the book, did you just say, I'm just going to basically focus my attention on trade secrets, and man, I'm an expert already, but I'm going to go further?
Well, again, like I said, my objective at the time was, I thought I was doing something like a public service to, get the word out there of how you should behave to avoid these kinds of problems. And then the book was published in April of 1982, and within that was back in the day when publishers actually promoted your book. And so it got sent around to a bunch of news and other reviewers and so forth. And then 6 weeks later, the IBM Hitachi case broke. And all of a sudden we saw on the TV Japanese executives being led in handcuffs to the courthouse in San Jose.
Right. And for people who don't know, that was a case where there were mainframe computer and software secrets allegedly stolen, I guess actually stolen, by Hitachi to build a compatible mainframe. A compatible
drive, I think.
Oh, compatible drive. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think an IBM 370 or an IBM mainframe kind of thing, right? Mainframe.
Yeah, it was an IBM 370, and the story was there were 17 binders. Okay, so it was paper.
Paper.
Remember, that's
Exactly.
how secrets were stolen back
Right.
then.
It's not just a little USB drive that you put in your pocket, something like this that you throw in your pocket and walk out with, and you've got the entire history
that was unknown. So then I became a talking head, sort of to explain what trade secrets were all about, and then I just started getting more and more of those kinds of cases, and it became a line, and I loved it. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was like divorce court, but without the focus on trivia, right? People got emotional about the sense of abandonment, or the guys who left you behind, and in the process took something that wasn't theirs to take, and they basically were engaged in treachery, right? So the feelings that people had in this kind of lawsuit were very, very strong, and because of that, this is one of the reasons why I tell my students if they have a choice between doing patent cases, because I ended up doing patent cases later. If you have a choice between patent cases and trade secret cases, always take the trade secret case.
It's far more sexy. More sexy.
Well, it has interest. If you're trying to tell a memorable story, well, get a case that already has a story to it.
Yes.
Right. Rather than trying to find it somewhere in the innards of a very, very dry
Well, the art of advocacy in patent cases is figuring out a way to create a story that is truthful and works. The trade secret cases always have that story, and the real question is, how do you present it in a way that doesn't make it go on for days and days and days, so that you don't hit the boredom factor? Because inevitably, it's actually, I would just expand on your thought, it's not just one stupid act, it's like a domino effect of, I mistakenly took the drive, and I guess I copied it all over the place, and I guess I lost it, and then it went on the internet. I mean, it's like one after the other, and you say, man, is this Murphy's Law, or is this just like reckless crazy making, or is it willful blindness, or what is it, Well,
it's, as you infer with that, Jack, it's a lot harder on the defendant.
Yes.
Because if there's a trade secret case that goes to trial, that means that there's a story to be told, and it is a morality play, and it's about the treachery and the abandonment and all that sort of thing. And the facts, the optics will never be very good for the defendant if it's a case that actually gets there. And then the defendant has to spend the time to reconstruct how they actually behaved in a way that should be morally acceptable to the jury. And that puts you in a really defensive position, trying to prove a negative. And so it's hard, which is one of the reasons why I spend so much of my time these days working with companies to try to prepare for that day, so that they're managing their secrets in a way that avoids the contamination that can cause a lawsuit like that.
So let's do this with a few minutes we have left, because time goes so fast, and we'll do part 2 whenever we can get it on the calendar for you and me, because we're both very busy. Life is going back to normal post-COVID. The morality play that's playing out in DC now is U.S. versus John Bolton. And I just am fascinated.
I know.
And I was fascinated watching the live Twitter stream of what was happening in that district courtroom, where the judge, a very capable district court judge for many decades now, Lamberth, directly said, look, I think both of you guys need to be spanked, because I could see that the government wants something that's, a little bit more than a little bit over the top. But, the right thing to have done as the lawyer for John Bolton is to have come in here and asked for declaratory relief before you juice this thing in a way that sells more books, because that's really what happened. So it looks to me like he's going to lock up all the proceeds. He's going to deny the TRO, but it looks like he's going to lock up all the money that comes out of the sales of those books.
Is that the sense that you get?
That's the sense I get reading what might be called the Twitter stream, which obviously has a lot of bias. I'm not there.
Okay.
There's not like a live stream into the transcript. We're going to get that. But what I'm reading just from what I'll say the more objective tweeters who are in the courtroom, and it's all available on #Bolton hearing. I'll send you the link. But it's like an amazing story where the judge is like right down the middle saying, look, I think both of you guys are at fault. You didn't handle this right. The lawyers didn't handle it right. And you're saying a lot of what you do is make sure the clients handle it right.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me he had that attitude about both sides not behaving well because, it certainly looked, because this thing had been approved first time in April, right?
Right.
And then it looked like, the president intervened and they said, no, and they're going to slow this down and slow it down forever. And it's been many, many months now that they've had this thing. And so clearly they were slow boating. The government was slow boating the issue, but he also, kind of acted in, with some self-help here rather than go to the court.
Right. You could argue it was a little bit opportunism and a little bit frustration and a lot.
But Jack,
a lot of this is overdue, right?
Yeah, but he may have been just a very calculated way to get exactly what he's gotten, because he knew that the government would go after him and it would be a big story and it would cause everybody to publish titillating excerpts. And so he's going to sell 1 million of these things.
Oh, easy. I think it's a 10x increase in sales. I think the printing presses are running full steam ahead, regardless of the TRO being pending.
Oh, sure.
I don't think they're stopping at all. I think they're like, hey, man. I mean, look, on the White House lawn, either today or yesterday, someone that had the full book was asking the person that represents the president, hey, what does the president have to say about this? It's like, wait a minute, that shouldn't be published.
I know it's worse in that sense than the Pentagon. I mean, you and I were around for the Pentagon Papers when it came out, little by little. But this one, it's already out there, and I think the judge made that point. I mean, you're here to get me to grant extraordinary relief to prevent something from happening that's already happened.
The cat is out of the bag. The horse is out of the barn. The bell can't be unrung.
The genie is out of the barn.
It's the same.
The toothpaste is out of the tube.
The case is gone. So, Jim, I'm out of time. You're out of time. But let's do this. Right. Let's plan a part 2 or part 3, whatever way we slice and dice this, and talk about what's happened in Silicon Valley, because I don't think any of us ever thought that Silicon Valley would be the center of the technology world as much as it's clearly become. We always thought, at least I always thought, well, it'll happen, in New York as well, and Silicon Valley will compete, because I always vacillated on, I took the New York bar. I know you're a member of the New York bar as well. Basically, I thought I was going to go back to New York, but I kept the leg in each place. Conceptually, New York has lagged on the technology side. It's clearly behind. It's not far behind on fintech, but it's pretty much behind on technology. Seems to me.
Well, I'll look forward to that, Jack. I mean, I do have some, I think special perspectives on that, because, as you know, I spent 5 years in Geneva as DDG in charge of innovation and technology. And one of the things that I got a steady stream of foreign ministers who were interested in figuring out how it was that they could set up a Silicon Valley in their country.
Absolutely. I mean, anywhere I go, people say,
everybody.
You're from Silicon Valley. Tell us what the secret is. Oh, there's one secret. And, we know there's a combination of things that kind of come together to create a real regional, if not national advantage, and maybe global advantage. And a lot of it is wrapped up into trade secrets and freedom of mobility and what happens with 16,600 non-competes. And, we know all that law, but we need to probably develop it for the audience, because a lot of people are like, this whole area is very confusing, and it can be, because there's a bunch of different things that all play together.
Okay, well, let's plan to talk about that.
I owe you lunch, because you kindly rescheduled because of a wacky situation I had today, so I want to thank you for that. And I'll get on your calendar, and I'm going to send you some other links that hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of as we plan the next session.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Jim.
Thanks
Have a
very
great
much.
day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on the Valley Current.